Ladies and gentlemen, in this RedGamingTech.com video, I'm going to be showing you basically how to learn Photoshop from the beginning. And when I say the beginning, I do mean everything. So this is going to be a series, or as you might have guessed, which is going to basically take you through everything, all of the user interface, from simple stuff such as opening a file, all the way down to masks and advanced blending, and creating really complicated selections and awesome filters and everything else that you can do. So this is going to be one of those things where at the start, people who are familiar with Photoshop aren't going to find that much stuff that probably is interesting, but you might find your tip here and there. But certainly later on, you're going to find quite a lot of awesome stuff. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with what Photoshop is. It is a image editing program that now actually has some 3D aspects to it, as you can see under the menu, and it also has some well, even video editing functionality, which we'll probably get into later on. We're certainly not going to be getting into it now. So for a while, I think the first thing we're going to do is just have a brief tour of the interface, and I'm just going to close that not to distract you. I'm going to put on a slightly more interesting than the default canvas, and we're just going to quickly click on that now, as it'll help to show a few other things. So anyway, first thing we're going to show is the file menu. There's nothing particularly amazingly interesting in this one. You've got Open Recent. You can see some of my recent files that I've been doing for you guys. You've got the close command, close all, and all of that. It's nothing particularly interesting. Automate and scripts we are going to be getting into later. Basically what they will do is allow you to either create PDF presentations or, for example, say put on a bunch of copyright onto images, that type of thing. It's also good if you need to, say, run a certain amount of color balance on, say, 10 images or 20 images. You can just quickly have that Photoshop do that, and you don't have to be there and manually type in the values for each one. So we'll get into that later. And you've also got stuff for flattening layers, and of course print and blah blah blah, and of course exit the program should you wish to be a quitter. Next one, you've got Edit. Edit is one of the more common menus that you're going to be using, to say the least. Stuff like Undo and so on, you're probably not going to be using through the menu. You're probably going to be smashing that Control Z or Control Shift Z quite a bit, or Control Alt Z indeed in some cases. Fade is something we'll get into later, and it's actually a very cool command that not many people use. And of course you've got your cuts and pastes and check spelling, which, to be honest with you, I don't really use. I keep forgetting it's there, if I'm totally blunt. And you can also do find and replace text, which is good if you're doing a lot of text-heavy stuff in a document. For example, if you're creating a brochure or something like that. You've also got fill and stroke, which I'll get into very soon as well. Content aware scale is very awesome and recently been added, as well as puppet warp and some other stuff. So you can see all of those, basically just standard image stuff. Image is pretty much what you'd expect. You can change the image mode, which we'll get into later. Typically speaking, if you're going to be working on, let's say, the web, in other words, the internet or video, or if you're going to be, say, just going with those kind of medias, you're going to be wanting to go with RGB color. CMYK is more for print. So you can actually do that when you're creating a new image. You can see right there, you can choose the different types. You can, of course, also go with Grayscale Lab. You're not really going to get into at the moment. I'll go into it more later. It's actually really good for certain color corrections, though. So we'll go into that for later. So yeah, mode is fairly obvious. For the most part, you're probably going to be wanting to go 8 bits per channel as well, but you do have the options of going all the way up to 32 bits per channel. Be warned, those do make fairly large files. You've also got adjustments. Most of these are available under shall I say, actual adjustment layers, which will be down here. But we'll go into those later on. But for the most part, they allow you to just quickly alter the colors of the images, or those type of things. I'll just quickly press Control U, which is hue saturation, which you can get from the image menu as well, and you can see that you could, for example, create a rather interesting looking circuit board. So you get the idea. I think you've also got auto tone, auto contrast, auto color. Those can be fairly useful if you just want quick and dirty. Their results are depending, actually. You can get some really good results from them. I would recommend, if you only need to do a small amount of alteration, you just quickly run those suckers, see what you get. If you're not happy with, say, auto tone, you know what, that didn't really do much, or you know what, it didn't really work for me, then you can say go auto contrast, and then you can say, hey, you know what, that didn't work for me, I've got an auto color. You can see the auto color does indeed add some fairly interesting effects, actually, and kind of like it. But anyway, that's not what we're going for here. You can also go to image size. Image size allows you to basically adjust the size of your image. Typically speaking, you don't really want to upscale too much. I'll get into this in probably the next lesson. But how it basically comes down to is that when you're losing pixels, when you're gaining pixels, let's say, for example, I was to turn this into, I don't know, a 4,000 pixel image, or let's say even, I don't know, 5,000, let's really highlight the difference. You can see that, by the way, it does indeed turn it to a 48.6 megabyte image from scratch. And you can also do the mouse wheel, by the way, to do that. You can also hold Alt to reset what the image used to be. You can also change the document size if you so desire, constrained proportions. So constrained proportions is simple. As I was showing earlier, let's say I was to do 5200. I'm sorry, not scales. There we go. Let's say I was to change that to 6,000. You notice that that number does not change. If I was to, however, press constrained proportions and turn that to 6,000, you can see that it does. So in other words, it makes it so that it's even on both sides. Anyway, resample image. Resample image is basically how the image will be interpreted by Photoshop to either make larger or smaller. You can see that if you click on it, it does indeed give you a brief overview of what this does. I'm going to go with smoother, and I'm going to click on OK. So if we were to go to 100%, you can see that it really doesn't do it justice at all. If 50%, if we were to go to 100%, however, by just zooming in, you can see that you start seeing pixels, and if this was an actual person or something with more detail than this, you'd get in trouble. So as I was saying, it's not something you can actually see the difference in that size. So anyway, I'll get into that later. Crop is kind of a cool command. You would use that for marquees, that type of thing. So you go with image, crop. You also do trim, which is very similar. I'll go into that later. Duplicate, you can use this to either duplicate a layer, or sorry, duplicate image. This would basically duplicate the entire image itself into a new document, which is pretty cool. So as I was saying, you can also apply image. We're definitely going to be getting into apply image and calculations later. They are quite complicated to explain. I'm also going to be getting into this stuff later on as well. Layer is fairly self-explanatory. You can create new layers, which we'll go into in this lesson probably. And also you can create layer from background, which basically would do this number. It basically is the same. You can actually do the same by just double clicking on this, by the way. Background layers you can't do certain things with, but we'll go into that later on. You can also delete layers should you wish, rename them. You know what, I'm just going to duplicate this layer. Oh, don't worry how I did that, I'll show you guys in a moment. Where is that? Yeah, you can just click on duplicate there. You can also do stuff like smart filters if you haven't have them applied, new fill style and that type of thing, the content options, rasterize. Rasterizing would be for, say, type. If you had a type layer or a smart object, we'll go into that later, I promise. You can also arrange layers and lock them if, for example, you've created a group or what have you. And you can also flatten or merge all, that type of thing. Merging would be, hey, you know what, I want to merge those two layers together. So that's pretty cool if, for example, I'll just create a really crap, I did not mean to do that, sorry. Click, or let's say, for example, let's just go with wrong tool. That's not very good. Alright, let's say these two tools are there. You can see that they are now independent, right? So click on that and they are now merged. Simple. I'm going to delete that though. I'll go into layers in more detail soon. You've got type, that's fairly obvious. You get character panels, blah blah blah, anti-aliasing. You know what, let's just type something. We'll just go with, I think Arial should do the trick. Let's go with, okay. Alright, awesome. Let's make that slightly more legible. Let's make it red just because. Alright, so now that should at least enable more of this. What are we up to? Type, that's it. Extrude into 3D, open type, blah blah blah. We'll go into this a lot more later on. You can rasterize type layer, which would be exactly the same thing as over here, rasterize type. So same thing. Rasterizing type, by the way, let's say for example I wanted to delete this, which would be the E key. Can't do it. It's actually going to tell you, hey, you know what, you can rasterize it here. If I was to do that, it creates it as the pixel layer, which is exactly the same thing as if I was to go up here and rasterize type layer. So now I could say delete it or do whatever the bloody hell I wanted with it. I'll go into that more detail later on, I promise. You can also font size preview, blah 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 language options should you so desire, which allows you to do Asian characters, that type of thing. So I'm just going to hide that layer. Select. This allows you to do stuff like select all the image. To be honest with you, I mostly just use Control A for that type of stuff. Sorry. Deselect, Control D, reselect, which is going to be Control Shift D. That's really good if you're doing, say, complicated selections and you just want to unselect it for a second. Has certain benefits. Color range we're going to go into later, but let's say for example you wanted to say select a certain range of colors in the image. Let's go with, you know what, actually all we want is those colors, so you can just go there and it will create a selection for you. Once again, I'll go into that later more and more. Refine masks, this will be for masks. Obviously we don't have one yet. I'll go into that later. Quick mask mode, the same thing. This allows you to say create masks and that type of thing. But we're not going to go into that yet. It is quite a long and complicated process. You can also load and save selections. So for example, let's say that is a selection. Obviously, we could now save that selection and we could call it blah blah blah, and it will create it into a channel. And then we could see that in the channels icon right there. So yeah, you guys get the idea. Okay, cool. So what else have we got under select? Actually, that's pretty much it I want to cover. Filters. Filters will allow you to, let me just actually click on something that allow me to do filters. Filters allow you to do quite a lot of cool stuff, and to be honest with you, you're going to be spending a ridiculous amount of time in the filters dialog, whether you want to do special effects or not. Even if you're a photographer, you're going to want to be using, say, something like, let's go with sharpen quite a bit, smart sharpen in particular. It also allows you to do some pretty cool perspective stuff as well. I'm not going to go into something ridiculously complex into this video because I don't really want to. What am I trying to say? I don't really want to bog you guys' mind or make this a complicated lesson or anything like that. But let's say, for example, we was to do that, and let's say you wanted to create some blurring, so it kind of looks like something wasn't in focus. You could do that quite easily by just going to blur, Gaussian blur, if I can find it, bump that up a little bit, and you can see right there that it kind of makes it look like, you know what, that part of the image is not in focus. And it, if I was actually doing that sensibly, with a decent amount of Gaussian blur, it could actually look like, it's kind of out of the camera focus, particularly if it was on certain images. It works really well with field shots or that type of thing. So anyway, I'm just going to delete that whole layer actually. I'm going to create a new duplicate of it, however, just for the purposes of this, because I don't want to harm anything. Not that obviously if I saved it would make a difference, but just, my own peace of mind. You can also liquefy and all that kind of stuff. Liquefy is really good for quite a lot of stuff actually. It's really good for making special effects. For example, let's say I was to create a, let's just go with a fairly straight line, and I'll just go to liquefy. Hopefully it will open up in a, oh, okay, it's an absolute huge dialog box, guys. Sorry about that. Let me just try to resize that sucker into something that's even slightly manageable. And you can see that you can do some really cool stuff. and you can kind of pinch it into the different locations and so on, and then you'd obviously just apply that, and you can see right there it looks kind of awesome. So that's just some cool stuff. I'll be going to Liquefy a lot more later. It's also really good, by the way, for say removing unsightly bumps, shall we say, in certain areas, or making those bumps a bit bigger. If you're a guy, for example, you might want to make your muscle and your arm a little bit bigger. It's also pretty cool for other little random bits and pieces, such as a lot of photographers or fashion designers use it, even for example for say drapes on curtains, because it just allows it to look smoother. So that can be cool. Sharpen, render. There's not that much there, but the stuff that is there is very powerful. I've already created one lesson which will show you how to make lightning. It was a bit of a dirty fix, but it does work. And you can also do stuff like Digimark and other crap as well. High pass is really good for masks, that type of thing, as well as minimum and maximum. We're definitely going to be going into those in a different lesson because it's too big. 3D I'm not even going to touch in this particular lesson. I'm just saying it's obviously for making objects more 3D looking, adding perspective, so on. View. This one's fairly obvious, but you're going to really not want to be using this command really to zoom in and out. You're going to want to be using the Control Plus and Control Minus, which I'm obviously using Windows PC. So you guys, however, for Mac, I believe it'll be Command. You guys have to check that out. So it's actually fairly simple to kind of navigate in terms of zooming in and out, and you're definitely going to be wanting to use that quite a bit actually. There's also another one that's really cool, and that's Control R. This is for rulers and is really actually handy. Is basically what it comes down to for setting up guides for yourself. I'll quickly show you what I mean. I'm just going to quickly press Control R, and let's say, oh, by the way, to drag that down, all you have to do is hold with your mouse, left click and hold, and then just drag, and we'll just create a guide there, and we'll just create another one there. And then, by the way, you can also change the orientation of the guide by holding the Alt key, and I'll just create one there, and we can just create another one there. So let's say, for example, this was the target area. This is a really bad example, but hey. So anyway, I'm kind of ad-libbing most of this stuff. So anyway, if you go to View, and you can kind of just hide that by pressing Control H, or you can just go to View Hide. This can be really good for guides, that type of thing, and you can indeed show exactly why or what you want to hide or not hide. It's pretty cool. Definitely use it quite a bit myself. You can also delete all of the stuff from there as well. Go into that later. You can also create slices or lock slices and do other things, and view print size and screen mode. So you can actually view different screen size, preview modes, that type of thing. Finally, you've got Window. Window is going to allow you to arrange the workspace, which is pretty cool. You can notice that you can actually have multiple tabs at the top here, and you can actually drag those around as well. We'll go into those later. It'll also allow you to see stuff like, let's say, the brushes palette. You can just click on that. Sorry, it popped out the little recording window that I've got here. And that obviously allows you to do quite a lot of cool stuff. So yeah, now bear in mind that this window here, this bar, this one here basically is context sensitive, and I'm going to have to show you that as and when is basically what it comes down to. I can't show you all of these because I'd be here until, well, this video would be several hours long, and I'm not really, going to do that. But suffice to say, it's basic context, or should I say tool sensitive. So different tools equals different commands on screen. Excellent, I think you get the point. Okay, let me just switch back to circuits because that looks cool. So anyway, yeah, I think you guys get the idea for that. This is your basic toolbar. You got everything here that you can see. Generally speaking, I don't click on these unless absolutely necessary. For most of the common ones, I just press, for example, V, which is the move key, or B for the brush tool. It's worth noting that default settings, you can't just keep pressing B to go for the different brush tools. You have to actually press Shift and B once you've actually gone to brush. How you get around that is Control Preferences. It might pop out of your recording window, I'm not 100% sure. And where is it? Where are you? It's somewhere under here. There you go. Use Shift key for tool switch. I've personally turned that off. I don't really like it. I think it's just annoying. It just slows you down, really, to be honest. So there you have it. You can also have zoom with mouse wheel as well. I don't generally do that. It can be kind of cool because that allows you to just zoom in based upon the location your mouse is. I don't generally do it because I have a habit of accidentally catching my mouse wheel. My mouse wheel is really loose. I probably need to get a new mouse, to be honest, but that's a different topic. So yeah. Sorry guys, just grabbing a drink of water. So anyway, you've got all your tools there. It's worth noting that some of these, you can see right there, have a little arrow in the corner. You see that? The easiest way just to get to that, you can actually just hold down the left mouse button. So for example with that, and then you can get tons of options. You can see some of them don't have so many, such as that one only has like, 3. Some of them have like half a dozen, for example that one. Another way to get around that, if you're like me and an impatient son of a bitch, you don't have to actually wait. You can just simply, for example, right click on it, and that'll do exactly the same thing. It'll just come up with the little options there, and so on. So you can just see all of them. This one is your color picker. There are other ways to pick colors, and you can definitely store them in swatches up there. But for the most part, you can have 2 colors on screen at once, and you can switch between them by clicking on that. Personally, I just prefer the X key. This means, for example, you can have, let's say, let's go with brush. It means you can have 2 colors, and you can just switch between those 2 colors as you desire. It's really handy to do stuff like masking, because masking requires black and white and various shades of grey to select various levels of transparency in that image. I know that probably didn't mean much to some of you. I will, however, go into that later, and you can see you've also got edit in quick mask mode and change screen mode, which is F. We'll go into that later, promise. You guys have already seen the rulers, so I don't really need to show you that one. Now you've got the tools over here. I'm not going to go into each of the little add-ons because they're going to take me a while to go into, but I'll just show you the basics. So for example, you've got Navigator, which allows you to, let's say for example you were to really zoomed in on the image, you can see right there, you can just quickly, I want to pan around. It also shows histogram, which is really good for color correction in certain aspects of the image. You can see it doesn't make a difference though where you actually zoomed in. It's basically just of the entire image itself, so just something to bear in mind. I'm going to quickly close that. See right there though, all of these are available just by clicking on this. You can also see history. History I'm going to go into in a later date, but for now just know that you can also, by the way, you could just do this. Let's say I'd made tons of really good changes, and by really good I mean not these crappy ones that I've been making here. You could just go ahead and do that, and you can save them or what have you, and just duplicate the states, and it's pretty cool. You can also, by the way, mouse over any of these things, create new snapshot, create a new document from current state. So if you really wanted to do that, you could, is what it comes down to. I'm not going to do that. In this case, I'm just going to do this, and you can see there's a snapshot up there. So that's the original, that's this. There's actually a really good reason for this, and it comes down to basically the history brush tool. Let's say, for example, you know what, I'm going to leave that until another lesson. That's quite a complicated thing to explain in this one small short video. Well, I say short, it's already coming up to 25 minutes long. Anyway, histograms, Navigator, history I've showed you, Navigator I've showed you, histogram I've showed you, properties, I'm not going to bother to show you that one, info I'm not going to bother with at the moment, characters, fairly simplistic, allows you to change the font type, kerning, that type of thing. We're going to go into this a lot more detail later on. It's a pretty cool palette, particularly when you start doing a lot of typography. But for now, it's not really worth our time to demonstrate or show. Colors. This allows you to adjust colors on the fly. It's another option. You can simply click on this. But for this one, you can simply also, adjust which color is visible. For example, let's say we want to make, I don't know, like a yellowy color. You can just go with that, or we can say make an odd green color. You get the idea. You can just change them, or you can indeed manually type in the RGB values. So you get the idea. It'll also sometimes pop up a warning, which will basically mean that it's not web safe. Generally speaking, that's not really an issue anymore. I'll go into that later on. So what else is there? Yes, swatches. These are basically libraries of colors is what it comes down to. You can also do this, and you can load a selection of colors. Most palettes actually do have that little thing. Some of it might be outside the recording window. Sorry about that. But yeah, you get the idea. Just click on a swatch and you get a general gist of how that works. I don't think it's really complicated or anything like that. You've got adjustments. These basically create an adjustment layer. There is another way to do that. You can just do it down here. I'll show you guys that in a minute. I personally don't really use this, if I'm honest, and I also don't really use styles that much either. At least these panels, I generally am more of a manual person when it comes down to this. Can be useful. I just don't bother. I figure by the time I figured out what the hell each of these does, because I keep forgetting which one does which, to be honest. I just never remember the symbols. That's just me personally. So anyway, you've also got styles, which is good for creating basic, certain styles on certain things. You can see what I mean. It does some pretty cool stuff and can be used to kind of as a stepping stone to kind of figure out, hey, what does this do? How are these styles being put together is basically what I mean. So, for example, hey, what's a setting do? Okay, I get it. Okay, so I get it. And you could just, go into this and actually really take it apart. It's just good for that sort of stuff. That's all I'd recommend. Well, that's all I personally ever used it for. Later on, I just forgot it existed. But that's just me. Anyway, so what else is there? Oh god, there's so much stuff. Okay, layers is what we're going to probably go into now. I'm going to get into some of this stuff later on, as some of it I don't think you guys need to know exactly, but some of it is, for example, layers. Let's say, for example, you want to see is a certain text layer. It's easy just to do it that way. You can also search by name or, modification, those type of things, and you can just, have them all on, blah, 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 blah. You guys get the idea. So, it's pretty cool if you just want to search for, say, effect or noise or blah. So you guys get the idea of how that works. It's not exactly rocket science or anything like that. And that obviously allows you to filter or not filter. So I'm just going to turn that off for a second. What else have we got? Yes. So you got normal. These are different blend modes. A couple of those may appear off screen. Sorry about that. I think it will be color and luminosity that's moving off screen. These are basically blend modes. These are incredibly important for pretty much everything you're ever going to do in Photoshop. I actually kid you not on that. To give you an idea of what a blend mode does, I have a feeling I've done something really silly. There we go. For example, let's say that we want to drop out. Let's go with the black colors. You'd, for example, just select screen, and that would drop out all of the light colors. Or we could do the opposite and select multiply, which would drop out all the light colors. There are certain things in between which may or may not give you results that are expected. For example, overlay, you can see that has a really odd effect, and you can see that, say, some of them have very little difference. Indeed, this is going to be one of those ones you're definitely going to have to play around with, and some of the results are really odd. What really, really, really gets weird is when you start multiplying certain things on top of the other. You can just see that right there. That it looks really freaky, doesn't it? So you guys get the idea. By the way, to do that, you can simply mouse over it by just, and then once you've selected one, you can just use the arrow keys. You can also get out of that by pressing escape, should you so desire. I'm just going to turn that back on, and indeed I'm just going to make that a normal opacity. You can, normal blend mode. You can also do stuff like adjust the opacity of the layer. Fill opacity we're going to go into later. But But let's say you had a special effect on this particular layer. This option would basically allow you to adjust the amount of opacity that special effect had. So that's maybe not the most simple way of putting it, but I think it kind of gives you an idea of what I actually mean. It's kind of a weird way to maybe put it. But anyway, 1 second guys, I just need to make a text. Sorry about that, like 15 people are texting me at once. Not anything important, but still, I don't want to get stalked. So anyway, as I was saying, almost wrap this up now, I promise. FX, this one allows you to add in special effects onto that particular layer. So for example, let's say we wanted to go with color overlay, and you can see that any pixels that were affected, any basically opaque pixels, any pixels that were active on that layer, now have a color overlay assigned to them. This can be fairly interesting, but let's say, for example, we turn the opacity of this all the way up to 100%, and then we were to say, turn the fill down on that. See, it's independent. Why that's what I mean by that is basically, you can see if I was to turn that like that, and then I was to raise the fill up, it's just kind of like, I don't know if I should go into the whole thing. It could really open up a can of worms. You know what, I'll go into that whole thing later, because that means I'm going to have to start explaining the FX and blending options, and I don't really want to do that in such an early video. So yeah, I'll leave that one alone for now. Okay, next one is these. For the most part, you're not going to ever want to apply a static color adjustment. You're always going to want the option to be able to adjust it, is what it comes down to. So for example, let's say, I'm just going to show you real quick. Let's say I was going to create hue saturation, and let's say that I wanted to say, hey, you know what, I think this needs to be a bit brighter. I'm just going to do that, and you say, you know what, I don't quite like this hue, I'm just going to do that. Okay, cool. Okay. And then you think to yourself, you know what, maybe that's a bit too much. You can just do this and somewhat will back on the opacity. Or you could say, hey, you know what, I just want to do something like create a gradient and have it like that. So it's kind of a cool looking effect and can be used for some awesome looking, very simple stuff. But once again, go into that a lot more later on. You can also do stuff like create invert layers, which can be useful for certain things, particularly masks and that kind of crap. You can also create groups. You can basically drag anything into a group, apart from the background layers, believe. Yep, it's not going to let you do that. You can also rename the group like that, and you can also drag the group up and down. And finally, last two, you can create a new layer. Simple. You can also, I believe it's hold Alt, and that allows you to rename it. And you can also do stuff like assign colors to that layer, which would be, for example, that. And then you can also assign modes. So let's say, for example, you wanted to just assign a blend mode to that as and when. It would be kind of cool. And you can see that that's also really handy for well, pretty much just for stuff like organization. Let's say, for example, you wanted to make all of your, I don't know, let's say you're making a drawing, and you said to yourself, hey, you know what, anything that's red, I know is part of this guy's face, and anything that's, say, green is part of this guy's, and I boom, you get the idea. It's just really handy and can be useful for other stuff, such as, say, anything green is an adjustment layer. It's just good to kind of note these things yourself. There's also quite a few options from under here. I'm afraid some of them are going to be hidden, but it comes down to that most of those are going to be available on the layer options anyway. It's also worth noting that panel options is pretty good to go into. I would recommend that you basically have a larger thumbnail size. I'm choosing medium at the moment. You can also go with none or small or large. I'd personally recommend either medium or large, depending on screen size. I'm only recording in a fairly piddly window, actually, and normally I have multi-monitor set up when I'm recording from Photoshop, so it's really kind of constraining me. But anyway, you can also have it so that it just shows you a image of the layer. This could be cool for, say, multi-composites. Say, for example, if you've got a large document, let's say, I don't know, 5,000-6,000 pixels wide and high, and let's say there's multiple layers in that create different things, can be really cool for that type of thing. And I think that just about does it. It's a bit of a whirlwind tour, and I know there's quite a bit of stuff that I didn't actually show, such as this stuff, which is basically how big the document is and all that stuff. But I could be here for a while, and a lot of it I could also explain later on, a lot more detail. So now you've got a really good understanding of what the tools do, what they're for, what the palettes do. I'll go into some other stuff in the next one, which is probably going to be basic stuff, such as, say, setting up preferences, or maybe just basic color alterations and that type of thing. So yeah, or maybe actually I'll show the basics of selections. I think that would be a pretty good actual start, don't you? So you can see how to actually start moving things and cutting it and blah blah blah. So anyway, I think this is a fairly good place to call this video. Hopefully you guys have found it somewhat useful. I'll definitely be putting out more Photoshop stuff soon. So anyway, hopefully you guys have found all my instructions fairly clear. If you have any questions, obviously you can ask. And I will see you guys around soon. So take care of yourselves. Remember to subscribe to Red Gaming Tech, and you'll always have the updates. Obviously, we're going to be doing a lot more cool stuff. I'm also planning to do some Premiere stuff, Adobe Audition, some other applications that I can't actually think the name of offhand. There you go, Audacity, which is one that I'm actually using to record this. Probably even some Dreamweaver, WordPress. So yeah, it's on top of all the gaming, of course, we're going to be doing. We're not going to be stopping the gaming or the tech, but I'm going to be putting out a couple of these tech videos, or should I say tutorial videos a week at least. Anyway, enough rambling from me. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now, and see you soon.